I'm ready. Welcome listeners to another episode of Pateo Radio. Today is Wednesday, March 19, 2014, and our guest comes from the United States of America, and his name is Irvin. Jan, please welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really pleased that you were able to make time for us. Before we dig into all the work of the Gnostics and knowledge and everything that is related to the Trivium, maybe you can give a little bit of background information about yourself so the listeners have an idea who you are.
Well, let's see. I run the Gnostic Media podcast. I run Trivium Education. I am the publisher of John Allegro's famous book, The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross. I'm also an ethnomycologist, having published 2 books in the field myself, as well as let's see here. Done a number of documentary films and things like that. The majority of my work people can find at gnosticmedia.com, GNOSTIC media.com.
Exactly, yeah. We made an announcement, and a lot of the information you just told is also there, so people can also read it there. But you also did work on the MK Ultra program of the CIA. About mind control. What can you?
Well, I've done research on the program. I didn't work on the program. No. Just to be clear there.
sorry for the confusion. No, of course, yeah. No, you exposed it. So maybe you can share a little bit of that. It's not the topic of our broadcast, but maybe for background.
Well, for I just mentioned that I'm the publisher of John Allegro's book, The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross. Mm-hmm. And from 2006 to 2008, I was working with another writer investigating Allegro's citations in the claim, and then what happened is I sort of made a spin-off project on its own, just verifying all of Allegro's citations in that book in regard specifically to ethnomycology and ethnobotany, or the study of mushrooms and mythology, etc. And as I went through Allegro's book, what I did was I lined up each one of his original claims, and then I tracked down each of his original citations, and that became my book, The Holy Mushroom, going through each of those citations, checking them, and what we discovered is that, in fact, Allegro's work did check out, and that there was a massive disinformation campaign against his work that was spearheaded by Gordon Wasson, who was the vice president of propaganda for J.P. Morgan Bank, and he also headed MK Ultra Subproject 58 for the CIA. And then later on, other researchers like Jonathan Ott, etc., continued the propaganda campaign against Allegro after Gordon Wasson had died in 1986, or it could have been 88. I forget which one of the two, though.
86
but yeah, so what happened though was researching all of this information on Allegro and his citations, and realizing that his research did in fact check out, and then going through and also looking at all of the newspaper and public attacks against him. One thing that we realized is all of the attacks avoided his research at all costs and simply focused on your typical intel disinformation, attacking Allegro, name-calling at him, making up lies about him, etc., but never addressing anything in his actual work. And when you see this, that should be a sign to your listeners that, something's not right here. When when people avoid every single detail and fact that a writer presents and just focus on name-calling, that the name-callers are trying to cover something up. So in about 2007, after writing the first piece, which was Gordon let's see, Gordon Wasson and John Allegro on the Tree of Knowledge is Amanita, or something to that effect. It was actually in 2006 that we wrote it and put it out. But in 2007, I was just pacing back and forth in the backyard, just trying to think through all of the information. All of a sudden, it hit me that the only way all of the contradictions disappeared in the story was when we placed Wasson as an intel agent. At the time, I just thought it was Wasson's personal agenda to appear as the #1 guy. I was beginning to get the idea that he was intel, but I didn't have any evidence or proof of it. And so that was when I had the big aha moment in 2007. He's got to be intel. But, you know, in 2008, although I knew he was intel, we didn't publish that in the Holy Mushroom book because we couldn't support it yet. Then going on from 2008 forward, I began researching Wasson's background, going through major university archives such as at Columbia University, Princeton, Harvard University, Yale, Stanford, and the Hoover Institute. We also found documents at the U.S. Library of Congress and a number of other universities. And what we discovered was that Wasson was intel. He also worked directly with Allen Dulles, the head of the CIA, at the Council on Foreign Relations, as well as at the Century Club, which is a CIA front organization. They pretend it's an arts club, but it's actually the East Coast parent club of the infamous Bohemian Club in Bohemian Grove. And the Bohemian Grove is actually a direct spin-off of the Century Club, with many of the same people and you know, the same agendas. So, having discovered that, I for a couple of years was looking for more information on Wasson and his background. I had tried to work with a so-called MK Ultra expert by the name of Hank Albarelli, and it turns out that Hank Albarelli had worked at the White House under the Carter administration. He was a White House lawyer there, and Hank Albarelli, as we revealed in the article, had misled my research for about 2 years, trying to take me off of Wasson's track. And I caught him in a number of contradictions, which I published in the article, and then I went behind his back and I filed a FOIA request, or a Freedom of Information Act request, with the CIA on Gordon Wasson, and in 90 days it was filled. And in there were 2 letters between Wasson and Allen Dulles just 5 weeks before the famous May 13, 1957 article that popularized magic mushrooms to the world. And so this is when we knew for sure that Wasson was CIA. And then last year I did a series of interviews with Dr. Colin Ross, who is an MK Ultra expert. And he had discovered documents in the original CIA release of files from the 1970s. At that time, the CIA had released about 17 to 20,000 MK Ultra related documents. And in there, we discovered the documents that J.P. Morgan Bank, along with Gordon Wasson and the American Philosophical Association or Society, were behind MK Ultra Subproject 58 and the launching of the psychedelic movement. And so then we had to reconsider what the entire agenda was. And then, you know, that forces you to question, you know, well, all of this was sold as spiritual in a New Age spiritualist movement and to solve the problems of society and all of this stuff. But then when we get in there, we see that it was a tool used by the CIA to really, and in the Zionist Zionim, to subvert the 60s anti-war revolution and to really corrupt the youth of America and, for that matter, the rest of the world, because of the way the memes spread around the world.
Yeah, it sure did. It sure did, and it changed the whole movement which was going on of liberation and free thinking, and it became infiltrated by that.
Well, it wasn't infiltrated. We have to be clear on that. It was never infiltrated. It was launched from day one with that purpose in mind. What was infiltrated was the anti-war movement to corrupt it. And then what they didn't want was active thinking people who were taking action in the real world. So what they did was they sold them a magical world a separate reality of drugs, where people were told to, if they wanted to affect change in the world, that they just needed to sit down on a pillow, do nothing, and meditate and think positive thoughts, and attack anybody and name call at them if they brought up any real information or countered the idea that all you had to do was be quote-unquote negative or positive. But of course, you can't judge something positive or negative if you haven't studied it. So the idea was just to get people to kill the messenger, to avoid critical thinking and to avoid the facts, and to bring about this so-called peace and love thing, which I find very dark, actually, because when you run across these types of people, these New Agers and psychedelic positive thinkers, they're often very dark and negative because, their total avoidance of anything so-called negative makes them very superficial, and they have to go around attacking people and name calling at them and dismissing any information that challenges their so-called rosy view of the world. So what you end up with is a group of self-proclaimed spiritually enlightened people who run around name calling and promoting ignorance all over the place. So that was actually really the goal, was to co-opt the thinking of the middle class and to basically sell them a new religion, with the end goal in mind being a new dark age, or what the infamous Terence McKenna sold the public as an archaic revival.
Exactly, and by thus doing so, creating hollow people who have really no real understanding of what is going on, and only a shallow thin
Sure.
layer.
Well, what people need to realize is that just because you think the experience is spiritual, and whether it is or not is irrelevant. What the point is here is what the predator thinks. And while you're sitting there positive thinking, ignoring the facts, and name calling at people, pretending that you're spiritually enlightened, your predators are taking advantage of you. And that is really the goal of the operation and how it worked. And MK Ultra is really still fully active today. And, we know today, Timothy Leary was an admitted agent. Terence McKenna admitted he was an agent. We have the documents that Gordon Wasson was an agent, and a number of these other guys. So when we go across the board, we look at this, we can see that the entire operation was CIA and was intentional mind control. And they even admit in the YouTube video, A Conversation on LSD, we have Timothy Leary and Myron Stolaroff and Oscar Yoniger and all of these guys sitting around, and Oscar Yoniger says, at Harvard, so-and-so says that in all of their studies and everything, nobody ever had a spiritual or mystical experience. And and they say, that the whole thing didn't happen until you crossed the Colorado River, that it was a California invention. And then Timothy Leary replies, "Wonderful, they're right." And in that same little clip that's only about 15, 20 seconds long, just in that one little clip, is when Tim admits that they were all agents, including Ken Kesey and the Merry Pranksters and all of that.
Whoa, this is shocking. This is shocking, Jan. Whoa. So they don't want us to know. They surely don't want us to know about the Trivium, about Gnosticism, and all those things. But before we go into that,
well, let me just make clear that I don't promote Gnosticism with a capital G at all. Okay, what I discuss is Gnosticism with a lower G, which is where we get the word gnosis from, which is where we get the word knowledge from.
Mm-hmm. And what is the difference with a capital G, Jan?
Well, a capital G would be a specific religion called the Gnostics or Gnosticism, whereas a lowercase g is dealing with the knowledge and facts in general, which is, to me, what a true Gnostic is.
Okay, yes, I understand what you try to say here. Yeah, okay. Let us go to the mushroom story, because I think it might be interesting, also combined with what you just told about the scam, the Ultra scam. Because what John Allegro found, that was what the original story of Christianity was based on, the effects of mushrooms in that region.
That's right.
Yeah, and then they mistranslated, or they misunderstood what the original version was, and then it was somehow created into a man-like story, but it was officially something, or originally something else. What can you say about that?
Well, the issue is, what Allegro discovered is that Gordon Wasson and these other guys, they were okay with discussing mushrooms and psychedelic drugs and other religions, whether it was Hinduism or Buddhism or Native American shamanism, South American shamanic practices, etc. That was all okay to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened was Allegro, who was a famous Dead Sea Scrolls scholar, leading the Dead Sea Scrolls team, working with King Hussein, etc., from Jordan, who was his best friend. The issue became that Allegro was pointing the attention in the wrong direction. Now, we also know that Aldous Huxley headed Project MKUltra. His brother ran the British Eugenics Society. Aldous Huxley also helped found the Esalen Institute in Big Sur, Northern California. But in September, I did an interview with Commander General Albert Stubblebine of the U.S. Army, and he admitted during the interview, per all of my research, and I have been researching Aldous Huxley's background for a long time too, and he admitted during that show that as far as he could tell, all of the evidence pointed to, yes, in fact, Aldous Huxley did run MKUltra, and Aldous Huxley was never warning people of what was really going on. He was actually the key architect behind the entire operation. But when we get into Aldous Huxley's book, Brave New World, we can see that they're selling soma and these ideas. We can also see throughout Huxley's work that they're always pushing Eastern religions, especially Hinduism. And the reason why that is because of the Hindu caste system, which goes all the way back 6,000 years ago to the Mahabharata. And so this is the book that established the Hindu caste system, which, where, the poor and lower caste were supposed to be there and just accept it happily, and the upper Brahmin caste control everybody else. Well, the hippies then would be the lower Brahmin caste, sold the idea to think positive and to ignore the negative, etc. So, this is what Huxley and the entire MKUltra thing was about, selling all of this New Age religion, Eastern religion, neo-shamanic religion, etc. And Allegro, on the other hand, he brought the attention back to Judeo-Christianity and showed that, in fact, Judeo-Christianity was based on the same thing. Now, here's where the problem comes in. If Judeo-Christianity, a patriarchal religion, is based on drugs, and then Hinduism and Buddhism, and as Wasson argued, and then the shamanic cultures are also based on these substances, then where did this idea of patriarchy come in? Is it so loving when Western culture thinks of Judaism, we have Zionism and all of the suppressive racist stuff going on there, and then Christianity, all of the suppressive nonsense going on there, to basically suppress the masses. Well, then what happened is that if these two religions were drug-based, then that forces people to question the foundational premise of what they believe regarding psychedelic religions. And so, is it so nice? Well, how could they have been spiritually enlightened if they were taking drugs and these priests, it just raises all kinds of problems in your average psychedelic head mind about the foundational premises and assumptions regarding psychedelic religion. Now, when we understand that it was the CIA who launched the attacks against John Allegro, with Gordon Wasson, the head of Subproject 58, spearheading that attack, then it forces us to question or re-question the entire foundation of the entire psychedelic movement. So then, when we hear Tim Leary admitting he's an agent and Terence McKenna admitting he's an agent, and we see this whole neo-dark age or archaic revival agenda, then the whole thing starts to unravel. Even Tim Leary's ex-girlfriend, the woman, her father was from the publisher's Hardcore Brace, Jovanovic, she's got this website and podcast show out today called Future Primitive. It's exactly in line with this whole neo-feudalist archaic revival agenda that they started to sell back in the 60s. And this stuff was all again, orchestrated and organized by Aldous Huxley for the CIA. And we also have proof from Aldous Huxley's own book, Moksha, that he was at the CIA's mind control conferences that were put on by the Macy Foundation, and so was his nephew Francis Huxley and Oscar Yoniger and a number of these guys. So then we can begin to see that the entire foundation was controlled. It was all, you know, the entire psychedelic culture was sold to us, and as Dave McGowan has exposed, the music culture was sold along with it. We're talking the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the whole Laurel Canyon, the Byrds, and you know, all of those bands, the Doors out of Los Angeles. All of that stuff was created as he exposed, and then they sold it to the masses. But Allegro's work, again, focusing on Judeo-Christianity, his work laid out serious questions that threatened the entire program. And then in 1971, right after he publishes his book, The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, he publishes another book called The Chosen People that exposed a whole nother level of all of this stuff going on as well. And then he tied it back into the Chosen People, or into The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross. So when we look at the entire operation, we go, well, what's going on here? Were they selling these experiences in the past as spiritual, like like Oscar Yoniger admitted, and and Timothy Leary says, wonderful, they're right. You know, were they selling this agenda to the public? And if so, what was the predator's purpose? And then that opens up a whole new can of worms, because what you think is spiritual, while you're sitting there on a pillow thinking positive thoughts and meditating, the predator is taking advantage of you, taking advantage of your ignorance and refusing to look at facts, taking advantage of your pillow-sitting mentality and not acting in the real world, and furthermore, selling you the idea that it's better to sit in a park and do absolutely nothing for your whole life but get high than actually be a productive member of society. So, you know, that's the operation in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's a big nut, but I get the picture. It's whoa. I don't know what to say, Jan, but this is quite shocking. So I think we also should see the book 1984 by George Orwell in the same kind of light.
Let me just interrupt you there, because George Orwell, or his real name was Eric Blair, was actually Aldous Huxley's student, and Aldous Huxley and he worked together and often debated about whose plan would win.
Okay.
So, both Aldous Huxley and Eric Blair were members of the Fabian Society. Even John Maynard Keynes was a member there, and John Maynard Keynes is the one who created the current idea of how finances should be that has wrecked the entire world. And basically the idea is to create a financial system that they can keep the masses suppressed and enslaved, and then use it to bring in eugenics wars like World War I and World War II, where they killed, 250 million people died in the last century, mostly in Europe. So this is obviously a eugenics plan. You get all the boys in the ditches with guns pointed at each other, and you get the wives and mothers at home making the guns for the boys in the ditches, and then you get them all to kill each other on either side. And meanwhile, the bankers and these racist Zionist types are sitting there making the money off of both sides. And so this whole thing, we have to step back and look at the premises, the agenda, and what is going on and how they run these things. But when we can see Aldous Huxley and John Maynard Keynes, and Keynes also worked with Huxley's brother, Julian Huxley, at the British Eugenics Society. So here's a eugenicist helping to create a financial model. Excuse me?
Yeah, that's clear. So what is the ultimate goal of this agenda of these people who want to dumb us down and want to keep us passive and not knowing?
Well, that's basically it, and they want to kill about 90% of the population. You have some religious groups think that they're chosen and that their ancient priests wrote some magic down in a book, and therefore they are the only ones, and other people trying to just stay alive. And then there's other financial groups that control those groups, etc. And so what we have is, agenda stacked on top of agenda. And rather than uplifting the people, it's always about keeping those groups in power off of everyone's backs. You know, the royalties, the royal families of Europe, the financial houses of Europe, etc. These are the main groups that want the power, and they want as few of us alive while they milk the planet.
Yeah, and this goes back to at least a couple of thousand years to ancient Egypt and probably Sumer too, I think.
Sure, absolutely.
And this is related to the story of the Argons as well, Jan.
Sure. Well, you know, one thing that has always been profound to me is how a group of people that's been kicked out of every nation on earth has managed to sell themselves as the good guys or the victims. Now, you know, when I look at history, you know, the bad people, the people that don't take care of things, the people that are trying to corrupt things are always the ones that are kicked out or removed somewhere or banished from something. But what we have throughout history is one particular group who does these things and then cries victim and actually gets the society to believe that they're the victims when they're the perpetrators.
And then we talk about the Khazars and the Ashkenazi.
Absolutely, that's exactly right. And you know, and this group has even gone through you know, Palestine and killed a lot of the wholesome Jewish community there, as well as the Islamic community there. And the Jews and Muslims in Palestine had gotten along together for about 400 years. So what you have is a racist ideology that hides behind religion. And the irony is that you know, the Ashkenazi will scream anti-Semite for anybody who exposes this stuff, but meanwhile, it's actually the Muslims are the Semites. If you look in a dictionary, the Muslims are the Semites, and the Ashkenazi are sons of Gomer and have actually no relation to Shem, and therefore they are not Semites whatsoever.
No, that's the real fun. But somehow you cannot explain that to people who shout this word all the time. They're not.
Well, that's the intentional conditioning that people use because they don't want you to look behind the veil. You know, if you start looking behind the veil, you know, I mean, if people realize that, for instance, these Zionist racist groups in Europe declared war on Germany first, not the other way around, well then it places the whole historical narrative in a completely different light.
Yeah, because at school they teach you that Germany invaded Poland, and that was the start of the war, the Second World War.
Sure, and the whole thing is just a big lie. And of course, you know, the people in Danzig and these other areas were being attacked and massacred, and that is entirely omitted, as is the fact that Zionism as a whole had announced or had declared war on Germany, I think in 1933 or something like that. So they had declared war first, not the other way around. And then not only that, but the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia killed about 60 million people. So, you know, while the Jews claim to be victims of Germany, the Bolshevik Jews in Russia killed 60 million Russians. And that they like to totally wipe under the rug.
Exactly. Yeah, I did the research too, Jan, and it's really shocking to see how they got away with it and how they're able to twist everything upside down and make people believe it. It's totally ridiculous. How do you look at what is going on now in Crimea and the situation with Russia versus Europe and the United States? Is it also part of the plan from Israel to create Israel?
I would imagine so, and of course the Ukraine is the original is the origin of the Ashkenazi.
Oh, I thought it was more around Georgia, current
I may be wrong. I'll have to check that, but I thought the Khazarian kingdom was part of, or Ukraine was part of the ancient Khazarian kingdom as well, wasn't it? I could be totally wrong, but
yeah, maybe
I'll have to check a map.
It was used at a certain moment. It was all around the Dead Sea, now the Black Sea. But yeah, probably there too. But yeah, I think it's that we see a stage now play in front of our eyes, and I can't see the real target here, the real agenda. So I thought maybe you could.
Well, yeah, you know, and I haven't studied it too much, but the agenda is usually the same. You know, you degrade a society, you get them to go in and kill each other, you PR the revolutionary movement, etc., and you fund the wrong guys, usually some Sionim or CIA or Russian intel type organization, and then you play it, you spin it to the mainstream media, the opposite of what it really is. But a lot of people are really waking up to these tricks, and people are getting really sick of it. And so what we need to do, and what the focus is today, is just to completely defund these governments and these organizations by moving to decentralized currencies that they have no control over, and then we won't be seeing any more these bankers and bank and government wars and things like that, because their legacy, and they need to be completely extracted out of the equation for all of humankind to live in peace. Most cultures and societies just want to give along. Most of my Jewish friends just want to get along with everybody else. But when you mix in Zionism with elite behavior and a bunch of Zionist propaganda on top of it, it creates this mentality that these people think that because one of their ancient priests wrote something in a book, that they have the right to commit atrocities against the rest of society, or against the rest of humankind, and then pretend that they're the victims when they were the perpetrators of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I fully agree. We need to financially unplug these big systems that are destroying our planet and everything on it. But before that, we need to somehow encourage people to do their own homework and to increase their knowledge. And in the ancient time of the ancient Greece, people had the 7 liberal arts, and 3 of them are really important. That's the Trivium. So maybe we can go into that subject now, Jan, and explain to the listeners why it is so important that we understand those 3 basic arts.
Well, sure, and I should mention that the Trivium and Quadrivium together compose the 7 liberal or liberating arts, and it's not liberal in the sense that the mainstream media has spun it, and today liberal means more communist, but anciently speaking, it was the antithesis of that. You didn't want to rely on mommy and daddy government to take care of everything. You didn't rob Peter to pay Paul. You didn't, you don't steal a third of everybody's money every year to then go and give it to philanthropic organizations, or to go hand it out in the homeless lines, when half the people probably wouldn't even be homeless if you didn't steal a third of their money in the first place, right? So the Trivium and Quadrivium. The Trivium is grammar, logic, and rhetoric. The Quadrivium is arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, always in that order. Now, grammar is who, what, where, and when. Logic is why. Rhetoric is how. In the Quadrivium, arithmetic is number in itself. Geometry is number in space. Music is number in time. And astronomy is number in space and time. So when you put these together in the proper order, you have a systematic method for verifying the facts of reality and knowing the truth. And since ancient times, this has actually been used against the masses. I want to make clear that the classical Trivium has always, as far as we can tell, has always been used for mind control, whereas what we teach people is the Trivium method, which is to level the playing field so that people can understand how this stuff is used against you. Now, the only way that the Trivium and this information can be used against you is if you decide to remain ignorant of it. Now, the liberal arts, and this comes from my website, triviumeducation.com, and it's from the definition of art under Webster's International Dictionary, 1893. It says the liberal arts, the higher arts, which among the Romans only free men were permitted to pursue. And we're in the Middle Ages, these 7 branches of learning, grammar, logic, rhetoric, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And so, right here, even in a dictionary from 120 years ago, we can see that only the elite class were allowed to study the Trivium. Now, you may have had teachers and things like that who were permitted to study it so that they could, teach their elite children, the children of the elites, their students, so they could teach them essentially. But that would be like one of the only exceptions where a slave might be allowed to study this stuff, because obviously when you learn how it works, it neutralizes the rhetoric that is used for mind control by these elites. If everybody today were taught the Trivium, marketing and PR and TV commercials and things like that would not work at all. They would just, they would be totally worthless. Mm-hmm. And so when we go back and look at the Trivium, and I mentioned the Trivium is grammar, general grammar, and it answers the question of who, what, where, and when. So when we look outside, that's looking at all of the things around you. Is it a thing? Is it a tree? Is it a bird? Is it a person? It's the who and the what and where was it? Was it outside? Was it inside? Was it in a ditch? Was it, what are the coordinates? And when, which of course is the time. And in logic, which is the next step, logic answers the question of why. But you can't know why something is without knowing what it is. So if someone says, why is that? Why is what?
Exactly, yeah.
So it automatically forces you to go back to what. But now if somebody wants to mind control you or to fool you, they'll give you a bad bad government education, maybe Finland excluded. But they're going to give you a bad compulsory government education that's going to reverse the order of these first two. You're going to put formal logic first and general grammar second. Now, what happens when you do that? What happens when people go around trying to answer why something is without who, what, where, when? They're nearly always going to come to a false conclusion of something. So if I put it in terms like this, like a computer, if general grammar or who, what, where, and when is input, and logic, just like in a computer, is processing, and rhetoric or how is output, then we can see the problem. Now, if you have a computer and you try to put your processing before your input, what happens? There's the old adage here in the United States: garbage in, garbage out. You have a total failure of the system. And so this is what people try to do, actually, that have gone through these systems, that get caught up in these New Age religions and psychedelic religions. They try to channel things without any facts or information. They try to tell you that the real world doesn't exist. You get these professors who sell this quantum physics quackery. Quantum physics, and we've done a large expose on quantum physics. Quantum physics is a total failure of logic. Quantum physics professors are a bunch of guys who have sat around in rooms debating the fallacies in their own heads for over 90 years without ever questioning the foundational premises, without understanding the onus of proof, without understanding how to remove the logical fallacies in their own thoughts, and then, they'll sell you magic and tell you it's science, while they admit that none of it can be proved or verified or anything, which, of course, is not science. I mean, like, these guys like Amit Goswami go all over the radio and things defining quantum physics as magic or voodoo, or, and admit that no two professors agree on it. Well, the reason why no two professors agree on it is because they haven't gotten on the same page, they're not using logic, and they're not questioning the foundational premises. But that was the original intention. It was to confuse society for, 100 or more years with this garbage quantum physics theory. And so, I recommend people check out David Harriman's book, The Logical Leap, and also his 6-hour, especially his 6-hour lecture series, The Philosophic Corruption of Physics, and then he's also done a 2-part interview series on my show, which covers some of the premises, but I do recommend studying all of it as part of the Trivium studies as a whole so that you grasp it. If you try to just study Harriman's work without the Trivium or without a foundation in logic, you're just going to be sitting there screaming New Age name-calling at me for daring to suggest that quantum physics and the New Age religions were all a big scam. But, going back to grammar, logic, rhetoric, etc., we can see again that if you put logic before grammar, the person is always going to be reaching false conclusions. And then not only that, but what's going to happen is it's going to destroy their self-esteem, And then they're going to be reliant upon quote-unquote authorities all of the time for their answers. So rather than just simply being able to go out and fact-check things, who, what, where, and when, and then removing the contradictions in your thoughts, whenever you see a contradiction, you say, oh, I still need more research. I have to dig deeper until all of the contradictions are removed. And then when the contradictions are removed, you come to the end on how you got there, and then you can explain the exact process of applying knowledge and understanding expressively as wisdom under rhetoric. And the rhetoric aspect is systematically usable knowledge and understanding. So grammar would be knowledge. It's the knowledge of all the parts, all the nouns that you're dealing with. When you look out the window, all of those nouns around your computer, those are nouns, right? And then the logic aspect is removing the contradictions from any information coming in via the five senses, removing any fallacies in your own thoughts, as well as any fallacies aside from the contradictions in that information coming in. And then rhetoric is being able to express exactly how you reached your conclusion to others, and then they can go step by step through your research and actually verify it and know if you told the truth or lied, or if you made a mistake, they would be able to go and point to exactly where the mistake was made. So this is the systematic method that the Ivy League schools have taught for over 2 millennia that they have withheld from the public. Now, during the 1800s in the United States, there was an outbreak of the trivium in the single-room schoolhouses. And what happened was, in the single-room schoolhouses, you get people teaching the trivium and the quadrivium, and then because you have younger children and older children mixed together, well, one of the best ways to teach something, or one of the best ways to learn something is to teach it. So you would have seventh and eighth grade kids teaching first and second grade kids, and then your average eighth grader, when they finished eighth grade in the United States in the 1800s, they had the equivalent education of a bachelor's degree today from a university. And so, you had to, in the 1800s even, to get into Harvard or Yale or even Oxford, you had to have a foundation in the 7 liberal arts and also Latin, Greek, et cetera.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, because that's the only way to create a strong foundation to build higher knowledge on top of that. Otherwise, it's just...
Sure. Otherwise, you're just channeling information from the Pleiades or Uranus or wherever you get it, And then you go around and you promote that stuff as true. I'm a medium. I'm a psychic. I channeled this. It must be true. And never mind actually getting any facts and reality to verify the information. And then what happens is when you send downstream false information that you haven't verified, it's a mental virus. And so, these groups that have intentionally pushed this, the classical trivium, or the use of the trivium as mind control on the masses, it's always been, just this illogical function of controlling others and not using it to uplift them. So our goal with the trivium method is to uplift everyone and to level the playing field so that it's no longer, after 2,500 years or more, it's no longer reserved for the elites and the graduates of the Ivy League schools. Today, everyone can have it. Everyone can learn how the trick is played. Everyone can learn how the mainstream media is lying to them and how the government manipulates the facts, and then we can extract ourselves out of that system and that behavior.
Yeah, and that's truly liberating. So that's marvelous work. Yeah, I'm sure you cannot read Dutch. I send a newsletter out every week, and one I sent out yesterday was about about this. So it's really remarkable that you mention it, because we're totally on the same page. And when you were talking, I was thinking of the books of Fritjof Capra I read when I was a young boy, and I loved it because he connected the ancient wisdom with quantum mechanics, and but now I know it's full of BS. And
well, quantum mechanics is really just a rebranding of the Kabbalah for science, and then it's just a farce. I just recommend people go on the Trivium Education website, start at the very bottom of the website, and play all the talks going up, and then you'll see that David Harriman is listed in those talks as well, and I believe he is anyway. I hope he is. And once you get to that, then if you maybe he's not on this, maybe he's only on the Trivium website. I'll have to fix that. But when you get to Harriman's stuff and you go through his lecture and everything, you see that quantum physics is just a complete failure of logic. And in Time magazine recently, and Time was associated with Gordon Wass and Henry Luce owned Time, and Time magazine, Life magazine, they were always a part of MK Ultra. Henry Luce was Skull and Bones, very dirty company. I don't recommend trusting their media by any stretch of the imagination. But recently they had an article talking about the new quantum computers, and the cover of Time magazine showed the black monolith, like from Stanley Kubrick's 2001 Space Odyssey, but it's the same black box. It's the black square from Mecca. It's the black square that the Masons use. It's the black magic box. And they admit in this article, well, they don't know how it works. And then they turn around and say, well, it works on different quantum planes. Never mind that different quantum planes haven't been proved yet. So how can it work on a premise that hasn't been proved yet when you admit that you don't know how it works? And so you get the entire joke, why is it a black box, right? So then what they're going to do is they're going to use this black box to tell all manner of fairy tales to the public for years to come. And, and then they'll get all of the lemmings who believe them, all of these Huxleyan transhumanists that, all of these idiots that think they want to load themselves into a computer. Well, the goal of that, again, Julian Huxley, who created transhumanism, he was a eugenicist. His idea was to sell all of the dum-dums the idea that you could load yourself into a computer and then he can walk over and turn it off.
Yeah, but when you look around, I understand what you're saying. But when you look around nowadays, especially the young people, they seem to be very connected to their handheld device. And
sure, and so what we need to do is get people aware of things like Linux and Bitcoin and cryptography and things, so that they can learn how to protect themselves. And they need to learn the critical thinking, so that when someone tells them that they can just upload themselves into a computer and live forever, well, if I recall, my computer is outdated about every year to 2 years, and what happens if the computer is outdated? Does it go in the trash heap? Who's going to keep it updated? What happens if the power goes out? There's just so many levels of insanity in the whole transhumanism psychobabble that it's just, I'm just totally amused by the whole thing, and not in a good way. But, what we see is it's a marketing campaign, and it's actually created by the same group that created MK Ultra. So, they want to sell the idea that, life is so hard. And when you watch these movies on transhumanism, et cetera, and Joe Rogan from, Fear Factor and these TV shows, he's doing these shows on transhumanism now, and you'll see him, add loading statements throughout the show repeatedly where, oh, life is so hard. Oh, did I mention life is really hard? Oh, hey, life is really hard. Hey, you got to load yourself into a computer. Oh, did I mention life is really hard? Never mind that it's the elites and the suppressive behavior and the governments and the banking system in the first place that keep all of us suppressed, and life generally so hard rather than uplifting people. So what you do is you ignore the false problem and you sell the idea over and over that life is so hard, and it would be better if you lived in a video game. And then you get the lemmings to, whether or not they actually do load you into a computer is irrelevant, if they even could. The idea is to make you think so, and then the lemmings jump off the cliff, and if they did, they just, upload you into a computer, they shut off the computer. Hey, look, all of the dum-dums are gone. And then not only that, but when they can keep you in a computer, if they actually could, then obviously those on the outside are the ones who have total control over you, et cetera, and then, they can have an entire world loaded onto one computer, and for all of those who want the world for themselves, then all of the rest of us are no longer consuming valuable resources that are only for them as far as they're concerned.
Exactly, because more and more people spend more time behind a computer screen or in a game world, in the virtual reality world, than in the real world outside. So And then the real world outside becomes their property. This already is, they think.
Well, the idea though is to sell the internal world is better than the external, and just constantly use these memes, and by removing critical thinking and selling this Huxleyan agenda over and over, whether it's MK Ultra or positive thinking or Soma or feminism, the Huxley family, and they were married to the Darwins. They were all about social Darwinism, but they were always selling the idea that you shouldn't breed and have a family or any of this stuff. And of course, who does this work for? And the elites have always liked to suppress the people, to break the family backbone, because the family unit can survive just about anything. Whereas when you are living in a socialist society where the government steals half of everything you get every year from someone else, then you're probably not going to talk out against the government because you rely on your food and everything. All of these single moms out there, et cetera, that have been sold this feminist nonsense. I interviewed this woman on my show, Karen Strowan, that has totally disproved feminism. That was another big mind control operation. But the idea is to get people to not have families, to not create supportive units, and then rely on the government. And of course, nobody is ever going to have a revolution against the government that, is their mommy and daddy and feeds them like a mama bird does its baby.
Exactly. Make everybody dependent, and then you have full control.
And this is one of the largest threats of socialism in and of itself, and not to mention, we can just look over at communism. Socialism leads to communism, and we can look at the 60 million murdered in the Soviet Union alone as justification for why we should never consider a form of government where only a handful control everything. And then, what they did was they went around Russia and they stole every potato and every animal and everything from the people and left them out in the fields to intentionally die. And then those who survived kind of, were the ones left, or they took them off into the gulags and forced them to build the Siberian Railway, et cetera, and slaughtered them off.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible. People talk about what was supposed to happen in the World War II in the Nazi prison camps, but I think that story is totally different. But what happened in the Gulag camps is absolutely real.
Sure. And people need to be very clear that it was the Jewish Bolsheviks who ran the Soviet Union, who started that whole system. Now, there is no difference between Jewish Bolshevism and Zionism. It's extremely racist. They think that anybody who is not Jewish is a cattle or an animal, and they can do mind control experiments on, they can kill them. It doesn't matter. They're not human. As far as these racists are concerned, everybody is just animals. And then to cover it up again, they play the victim when they were the perpetrators of the whole thing.
Yeah. This can't be mentioned enough, I think, because many people are so brainwashed that when you even try to explain this to them, they immediately put their fingers in their ears. They don't want to hear it because they think that you're crazy. But
absolutely. Well, that's one of the tricks, and that goes back to the Trivium. See, if I want you to ignore information that somebody else brings up, I'll just start name calling at that person. That's what they did to John Allegro that we discussed earlier. Mm-hmm. You just send a barrage of name calling and nonsense at that person. And most people will be like, oh, well, he's an idiot. He's this or that. He's a pinko commie, homosexual, pink shirt wearing, shoeless homeless guy. And therefore nothing he says could possibly be valid under any circumstance, which of course is absurd. Of course, you take any information that you bring in via your five senses on a point-by-point basis, and you verify it. And if you hear someone name-calling or using these sort of tricks, this needs to be the trigger in your mind that alerts you to study that more and not to just dismiss the person because you heard a bunch of ad hominem attacks. That person, one of my favorites is that person is wrong because
Yeah, it makes me laugh too, but I get your point, and then people stop thinking. That's the whole point. They stop thinking.
That's the whole point. Yeah. So they'll call you crazy, and that's because these people are victims of the social conditioning and the mind control. So You know, when you bring up facts, it's their natural reaction because of the mainstream media and compulsory education and their lack of logic and critical thinking to just lash out at you with name-calling and nonsense and never just go check the documents. Now, if they spent 5 or 10 minutes looking at the documents, they go, holy crap, you were right, that's true. But, you know, and then when you couple quantum physics in on top of it, then quantum physics sells the idea that there is no truth. 7 different realities are possible at the same time, so therefore, don't even look for the facts.
Yeah, I agree, and that's to me that's the biggest New Age lie. There is no objective truth. It's all subjective, and everything is true. And
sure, you know, you're just gonna think it the way you want it, really. So, like, if you walk out of the grocery store and your car is missing, you just go, "Look, man, my car elevated to another plane, dude." Or do you go, "You know, shoot, my car was stolen. Maybe I ought to call the police or somebody or check into this." You know, and people who want to believe in all of this arbitrary nonsense, when you go to the market and the guy hands you your change, do you count it? Or do you just go, you know, he gave me $1 million, and then you walk out in the store, and sure enough, there's $1 million in your pocket? I guarantee you, each and every time, period, without exception ever, you'd never ended up with that $1 million in your pocket. And if you didn't get the exact change, you either didn't count it, or you were so busy positive thinking and nonsense that you just got, you know, the guy just stole from you. And so, again, going back to what I was saying earlier about the predator versus these positive thinking off-balance types, you know, the predator loves it when somebody is off-balance because that's when they can take advantage of you. So, you know, these positive thinkers, that's not balanced thinking. That's off-balance. That's focusing on one side of something, but it's not even focusing on that because you cannot possibly judge something that's as positive or negative before you've studied it first. Now, if some so-called negative information saves your life or protects you and your family, isn't that positive? But if you didn't study it first, how could you possibly know? So all of your decisions then have to be based on ignorance. And so that's what ignorance comes from.
Not wanting to see, ignore, to choose not to see.
Exactly.
Yeah, great. The time is nearly up, Jan. You mentioned the work of David Harriman. My suggestion is that we, after this broadcast, have contact and that I can put some links to the work of this David, so that people can study it, because I think it's really valuable. And
well, I do recommend again that they study the Trivium material first, so that they're more prepared. You know, the Trivium is really a prerequisite to Dave Harriman's work, but they can find all of that up on the Trivium Education website, as well as on the Gnostic Media website under Trivium Studies. And if they just go through there and just, you know, start playing all of it, and then up on the Trivium Education website, we do have study materials and everything, and we do recommend that people study all of it. You know, you're not looking for a sound bite. You're not looking for a 10-minute news clip enlightenment here. You've been, you know, this stuff was removed from your education. We're trying to help you get it back, so people have to take responsibility for themselves and undertake a serious study. It takes about 2 years for the Trivium to get integrated into an adult mind, whereas children are much different. Adults never want to believe that they don't already have critical thinking, and, you know, all adults, you know, will argue with you till they're blue in the face that they have critical thinking, and you're an idiot, I already have critical thinking. You know, while they're using ad hominem attacks and things against you while you're trying to explain it to them. So adults are kind of an interesting, you know, are in sort of an interesting area in how you have to be careful in the rhetoric aspect of approaching them with this information, because, you know, most adults are always going to be guarded that they have critical thinking and that nobody could have possibly fooled them. And then that's why they lash out at you with name calling and calling you crazy, etc., rather than questioning, okay, was I duped? Am I thinking with logical fallacies rather than facts? And the word fallacy comes from Latin fallare, to lie. So am I thinking with lies rather than facts? And, you know, if we can get them to realize that they're thinking with fallacies, then we can, you know, then they can begin to check the facts and set themselves free.
Yeah, marvelous. I'm really delighted, Jan, that you were my guest at this broadcast, because you mentioned so many things. The listeners, you have listened maybe for 1 hour, but now you realize that you have to study for 2 more years, so that might be a shock. But I think it's worth every minute of it because it changes your
Think of your family and your children, and let me just pose this hypothetical question to the audience. If you could have certainty and truth with any information coming in via the five senses into your mind, if you could have certainty with any information and make valid decisions on that information, would that not benefit you?
I think everybody knows the answer to this question. Thank you very much, Jan, for sharing all this with us. It was a real pleasure. Thank you, listeners, for listening to a broadcast of Pateo Radio. My guest for next week is not yet certain, so just keep in touch with the website, and I hope you tune in next week. Bye for now.
Thank you, Jan.